I want to rank Norway by answering 5 questions about its economy, stability, geopolitical position, is it good for its people, and is it good for the rest of the world? Now, that might sound strange, but at least hear me out. Let's take a look at Norway's economy. Norway is quite unique, and to understand that, let's do a quick history lesson. Contrary to popular belief, Norway in the 60s was not poor. It produced large quantities of fish, built ships, and was building out its infrastructure. If that was all to the story, there is little doubt that Norway today would be a very prosperous country, similar to its Scandinavian neighbors. It would not be super mega rich, just very, very rich. And that's not a bad thing in any sense of the word. But something happened in 1969. Norway struck gold. Actually, it struck oil, and that's worth a lot more. In the next decades, it would turn out that Norway has a massive amount of oil under its ocean floor. In the next 50 years, something even more surprising happened. Norway was responsible. It made several smart moves. It put a significant 78% tax on oil. It created a state owned company that managed, extracted, and sold a large part of the oil, and it was actually well run. This allowed Norway to keep the profits and direct the investments so that it aligned with the country's goals. And in 1990, they created a sovereign wealth fund. Now, what's a sovereign wealth fund? Well, basically, it's a group of investments where Norway put its oil money. So the money generated was going into a wide portfolio of stocks and bonds outside the country. And right now, it's accumulated $1.4 trillion. So, yes, Norway, a country of 5 million people, has almost $1.5 trillion in investments. This is truly amazing, and the government was limited to withdrawing 3% a year to make sure that the investments keep growing. And most years, they don't even withdraw. So, this portfolio has been a giant piggyback for the country of Norway. Now, let's take a look at the rest of Norway's economy. Oil and natural gas make up the majority of exports. Fish also plays an important role. And no, that's not a bad thing. When a country of 5 million people exports 10 billion in fish, I can only view that as very impressive. Also, there are other sectors like machinery and tourism that play a role in Norway's economy. The main export destination is the EU and the United Kingdom. So, overall, it's wrong to say that there is no diversification in Norway's economy. Let's give it an economic rating. So, an extremely high GDP per capita, a trade surplus, there is some dependency on oil, but there are other sectors. So, overall, when taking into account the overwhelming size of the Norwegian economy and its small population, Norway gets a 10 out of 10. Now, let's look at Norway's economic stability. Economic capabilities are great and very important, but if they're temporary and based on high debts and high spending, that does not necessarily put the country in a good position. Norway has very low debt compared to its GDP. It has a fantastic credit rating. The fact that oil plays such a significant role in Norway's economy is troublesome. And it would have gotten Norway probably a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10 if it wasn't for the already mentioned wealth fund that Norway has accumulated. Taking into account its significant size, it would allow Norway to weather out a storm related to fluctuations in its oil industry. And this was exactly the reason why the fund was created. So way to go, Norway. Thanks to your piggy bank, you get a 10 out of 10 on stability. Now, let's observe the geopolitics of Norway, analyzing the country's population and its geographical position, allies, trade partners, and rivals. Now, looking at the country itself, most of the population is located in the south. Connecting Norway has been a very difficult task, but right now it's carrying out a massive infrastructure project to connect the entire country through a series of highways, bridges, and tunnels. This will not only make Norway more connected, but will be an economic boost to the country's farther areas. Norway is a member of the EEA, the European Economic Area. It's basically a trade union with the EU, and since most of Norway's trade is with the Union, this is its most significant trade connection. Now, this extends the European single market, meaning that although Norway is not a member of the European Union, it has access to a free movement of people, goods, services, and capital. It's also a member of NATO, and in 2010 it signed a border deal with Russia, splitting the disputed ocean territories between the two countries. So let's sum up. Norway has invested heavily in connecting the country and overcoming its geographical barriers. It is a member of NATO, located in a stable region without any enemies in the traditional sense. And maybe most important of all, it is a member of the EU single market. Although Norway does not have the overwhelming influence of some other countries, it is definitely in a good position. And that's why in this category it gets a 9 out of 10. The next category we will look at is the life of the everyday Norwegian. All of the things previously mentioned are important and all, but if the average person does not receive the benefits, what's the point? So the first thing we can notice about Norway is that it's extremely expensive. This is partially due to the high cost of labor, but also Norway has very high taxes. The country makes Sweden look cheap. Although this is very expensive looking from the outside, Norway also has extremely high wages. And the taxes are significant, but Norway provides strong safety nets, a very good education, and healthcare. So overall, the Norwegian people get a lot from their government. When researching this, I once read a comment from a Norwegian that said, "I've never felt super rich, but I did feel peace." And I think that's even better. The inequality gap in the country is lower than in most places in the world. Norwegians rarely work overtime. So overall, at least it's my personal opinion, that the taxes might be worth it. Another interesting thing is that Norway has no minimum wage. So is this a libertarian success story? Well, no. The country has extremely strong unions, so they negotiate the price for their individual industries. Now, unions played an important part in Norway's development, and at least in part, are responsible for the high wages. So overall, if you ask me, is it good to be a citizen of Norway? I would definitely say yes. Yes, it is. So Norway gets another 10 out of 10. I swear, I'm not paid by the government of Norway to do this video. The last way I want to rank Norway is on how good is it for the world. This might sound strange, But I say, why not? We judge individuals on whether they are good for their community, so why not do the same with countries? And by that, I mean, is Norway good for the world? We all agree that countries have some duties towards their citizens, but I would say that they also have, at least to some extent, a duty to people outside their borders. If not an obligation to help out those people, then at least an obligation not to harm them. So hear me out. Norway does a lot of things great. It has high foreign aid, the people of the country donate a lot to charity, and it's the number one country when it comes to new electric car sales, beating out everyone else by a significant lead. And maybe most importantly, it gets the vast majority of its electricity from hydropower. Ironic for an oil powerhouse, right? Now, all of these things are without a doubt great. But let's look at something else. Norway's massive oil extraction. I thought a lot about whether to hold this against Norway. After all, most countries would do the same if they could. But I don't think that's the right way of looking at this. I will explain that using an imaginary scenario. An executive earns a lot of money by committing fraud, and a pension fund is destroyed as a result. Maybe most people, if given the opportunity, would do the same thing as our executive, but that does not absolve him of guilt. The consequences are still there. People lost their retirement, their futures. The second point The second point I thought about, that oil would have been extracted anyway at a different location, right? There are two reasons why, in the end, I didn't agree with this statement. One, Norway's extraction means there's more oil overall, and that is making it cheaper. Lower oil prices have two consequences. One, it's easier for oil to compete with alternatives. And two, lower oil prices means more oil is consumed overall. Still, even if all that oil was produced in another place, I don't think that this absolves all the guilt. Maybe the pension fund from the hypothetical scenario would have been defrauded in another way. But still, this does not absolve our imaginary executive of all guilt. All in all, I counted the many benefits of oil as pluses for Norway. And I believe that it's only fair if I also acknowledge its negative effect on the world. And if you're a Norwegian and you're feeling mad, at least hear me out until the end. I want to explain to you my thought process and why, as time passes, I care more and more about climate change and its consequences. I believe as a threat, it is different from what we as humanity have faced before. I see two reasons for this. One, the main bulk of the consequences will be felt in the future, and we don't usually plan that much long term, sadly. And two, we are facing the consequences at the group because they do not stop at our borders. Usually, when we make stupid decisions as a country, we have to bear the burden. But now, country A can do almost everything right, lower its emissions, and so on. And country B can be reckless and contribute a lot to the problem, and they will face the same or at least similar consequences. This is why it's significantly harder for countries to feel incentivized to do everything they can. And look at this massive part of the world. Hundreds of millions of people. They are the ones that are going to be hit by climate change the worst. It will kill off their farms and water supplies. It will make infrastructure harder and spark massive migration waves. We are making development harder and harder for these people. And these people want the same things as us, to live in a country that is wealthy and prosperous. A country like Norway, or at least a fraction like Norway. And if we believe that every life is worth the same, then I have to take into account Norway's oil extraction. Honestly, when I started making this video, I assumed that Norway would be an 8 in this regard. But to measure that, I did a lot of research into the impacts of our consumption of oil. And honestly, it's a lot worse than I thought. So Norway gets a 4 in this category. But if you're Norwegian, hear me out now. Good work, you guys. You did a lot of things right and have a great country that is great for its citizens. Now, you've made progress in making it good for the world. But continue, don't stop, give it your best, so that in 10 years, you're not a 4 in this regard, you can be a 10. And then, I think it will be a perfect country. So, let's sum everything up. Norway gets a 10 for its economy, a 10 in stability, a 9 for its geopolitical position, a 10 for the way it treats its people, and a 4 for its impact on the rest of the world. And that adds up to 86. I doubled the numbers so that it goes up to 100. I have absolutely no rational way of explaining this other than I like it when rankings go up to 100. It goes without saying that this is an extremely high score, and I will be adding new countries to this list as I make videos and analyze them. So it will be interesting to see if anyone can top Norway. I invite everyone to do their own research. I could be wrong about everything. I do my very best with these videos. But still, honestly, you should never fully trust a YouTube video. I know that sentence might not get me any likes and subscribers, but that's okay. Have a good day, guys.